Sometimes a loss is actually a new beginning. Feeling jobless, hopeless, and trapped, Alex believed that every door in life had closed on him. Until one winter night, when he crossed paths with a mysterious woman stranded on the road. Was this encounter just about lending a helping hand? Or was it fate leading him toward an entirely different future? Don't miss this powerful story of a man hitting rock bottom and rising again. Second chances always exist, but it takes courage to see them. Watch now to uncover the rest of the story. Don't forget to like and support us. Subscribe for more inspiring content. Alex was 32 years old and life had never been easy on him. He had been stuck in a cycle of misfortune and endless struggles for years. No matter what he did, things always seemed to hit a dead end. When he was a kid, his family had moved from a big city to a small town. His father had worked in factories for years, while his mother stayed home to take care of the kids. Their biggest dream was for Alex to get a good education and build a solid career. But Alex had never really found a path where he truly belonged. There was always something missing in his life, like an emptiness that no amount of effort could fill. At a young age, he started looking for a way out, but luck was never on his side. He had to drop out of school and ended up bouncing from one job to another. Eventually, he found work as a mechanic in a garage. He was good with his hands, he understood engines, but the chaos in his life never seemed to leave him. The bills kept piling up, debts were growing, and his hopes were fading a little more each day. Even waking up in the morning facing a new day felt exhausting. That evening was no different from the others. The town was frozen under the harsh grip of winter. Snow had covered the roads and the cold was biting. The streets were empty and silent. By the time he left work, fatigue had settled deep into his bones. It had been a rough day, he had argued with his boss, and the car he had been working on had broken down again. As he scraped the ice off his car's windshield, a deep sense of helplessness washed over him. The weight of his life was pressing down harder with each passing day. As he slowly drove off, he noticed a car parked on a side road parallel to the main street, just before leaving town. A silver sedan sat helplessly on the roadside. Someone was inside, gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to start the engine. The air was freezing, and at that moment he could feel that the woman inside wasn't just struggling with her car, she was battling something deeper, something unseen. He didn't know who she was yet, but soon enough he would learn that her name was Jessica. Alex quickly turned the wheel and drove toward the woman. Helping her wasn't just about doing a good deed. Deep down, there was something about this moment that made him feel more complete. For a brief second, being there for someone in a difficult time filled the emptiness inside him. The woman noticed the reflection of approaching headlights on her window. At first, she eyed Alex's car cautiously, but then reality sank in, she had no other choice. The cold was merciless on the deserted roads of the town, and she couldn't afford to be stuck here for hours. Alex carefully parked next to her car and stepped out quickly. The air was sharp and freezing, his breath turning into mist as it hit the night air. The woman shivered slightly as she rolled down her window. Her eyes held both hesitation and a glimmer of hope. "Can you help me?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling slightly but not entirely hopeless. Alex hesitated for a moment. Seeing her stranded like this reminded him of himself. He had spent years fighting through life alone, constantly battling helplessness. But now, for the first time, he felt like helping someone else might also be his own way out. "Of course," he said instinctively and moved toward his trunk. He pulled out the necessary tools to change the tire and stepped over to Jessica's car. Together they got to work. Every passing second meant something different to Alex. As his frozen fingers struggled to loosen the bolts, he realized he was also loosening the grip of his own past. He had spent his life waiting for a helping hand, but no one had ever reached out. And now, by helping someone else, he was beginning to rediscover his own strength. When the last bolt was tightened, Jessica let out a deep breath and rubbed her hands together before turning to Alex. There was gratitude in her eyes, but it wasn't just that. There was something more, something that made Alex truly see her. She smiled and reached out slightly, her voice softer now. "Thank you so much." Then her gaze deepened and she added, "I only saw one way out of here, and it was you." At that moment, in the middle of the dark night, an unspoken connection passed between two strangers. In the freezing air, on snow-covered roads, and in the silence of the night, something in Alex's life had finally started to change. Jessica was in her early 50s, a woman who carried both grace and strength effortlessly. The wisdom that came with years was reflected in every movement and every look. She had the confident posture of a strong leader, yet the depth in her eyes showed that she wasn't just powerful, she was someone who had carried the weight of life on her shoulders. Her elegant and professional style gave her both an air of seriousness and sophistication. That moment, her dark-colored suit complemented her long, wavy brown hair and her sharp yet gentle brown eyes. When her car finally started, Jessica let her hands rest lightly on the steering wheel. The steady hum of the engine brought her a sense of relief. Yet, at her fingertips, there was still a slight tremble, just like the uncertainties life had thrown her way from time to time. She turned her gaze to Alex and gave him a small nod with a gentle smile. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice calm and sincere. "May I ask your name?" Alex smiled slightly. "Alex," he replied. There was something about Jessica's presence that brought him an odd sense of peace. Maybe, for the first time in a long while, helping someone had made him feel like a missing piece inside him had finally fallen into place. With genuine curiosity in her eyes, Jessica asked, "What do you do for a living, Alex?" The relaxed look on Alex's face faded for a brief moment. He thought about his own life. He didn't have a big career or a success story to brag about. He was just a man trying to get by, to survive another day. "I work at a mechanic's shop," he said, his voice carrying a slight hesitation. "Mostly fixing old cars, engines. That's my job." Jessica tilted her head slightly, as if reading between his words. Life had a way of pulling people away from the paths they once imagined for themselves. In that moment, she sensed that Alex wasn't just fixing cars, he was trying to fix his own life as well. "That's really good to know," she said, looking straight into his eyes. "I honestly don't know what I would have done in this cold, stuck on a snowy road. I'm truly grateful for your help." Alex shrugged, but his words were genuine. "It's no big deal," he said, warmth flickering in his eyes. "I try to help however I can." Jessica held his gaze for a few seconds. Alex found himself looking right back at her. In that moment, they both felt it. This wasn't just an ordinary encounter. Sometimes, life placed a pause in unexpected moments, and maybe, just maybe, this was one of those moments for both of them. Jessica gave him a soft smile, then turned toward her car. But before getting in, she looked at him one last time. "Thank you again, Alex," she said, her voice sincere. "I hope you always come across people as kind as you." Alex narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled, but he said nothing. Jessica got into her car, and the low hum of the engine blended into the quiet night. As her car slowly disappeared into the distance, Alex watched her silhouette until it was completely gone. The cold night echoed silently over the snow-covered ground. As Jessica drove away, Alex realized that the emptiness inside him felt a little lighter. Something had shifted. He couldn't quite explain it, but somehow the presence of this stranger had given the night a different meaning. The next day, as Alex left work, he kept his head down. The sky was gray and darkness had started settling in early. The sharp chill of the cold morning weighed on his shoulders like a heavy burden. But the real weight was the hopelessness he carried inside. The argument with his boss still echoed in his mind. In that moment, he had felt like everything was over, but when the news finally came, something inside him broke. He had been fired. The pressure he had been carrying for days suddenly turned into a deep emptiness. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. That morning, the worry gnawing at him before heading to work had now spread through his entire body. But he wasn't surprised. He had seen this coming. It had always felt inevitable. When he stepped into his boss's office, he noticed how much smaller the room felt than usual. The walls seemed to be closing in. His boss's dissatisfied expression only made the tension in the air heavier. Alex took a deep breath and waited. Then the words that followed hit him like a verdict. "Alex, this job isn't for you," his boss said, his voice firm and cold. Alex stared without moving. "Why?" he asked. "What did I do wrong?" The slight tremble in his voice was overpowered by his disappointment. Every effort he had put in, everything he had worked for, was erased with just a few sentences. His boss squinted and flipped through some papers. "You put in less effort every day," he said indifferently. "How much longer do you think I can put up with that? I don't want you coming in tomorrow." For a moment, Alex didn't know what to say. The years had passed by like the wind, and now they flashed before his eyes. A lifetime of struggle wiped away in mere seconds. At that moment, he felt completely empty. The words got stuck in his throat, the lump in his chest swallowed before it could turn into a sob. Only silence remained. As he stepped out of the office, he noticed that the snow was still falling. A white blanket covered everything, but it gave him no warmth. In this cold, the streets felt lonelier than ever. The wind hit his face, sending a shiver through his body, but it was nothing compared to the emptiness he felt inside. It wasn't just the cold that weighed down his steps. It was the uncertainty inside him, the one question that echoed through his mind. How am I going to survive now? As he walked through town, he disappeared into the familiar silence. Unemployment, debts, the fear of not making it to the end of the month. They all came crashing down on him at once. The cycle he had been trapped in for so long had only grown darker. People passed by on the streets, but he felt completely disconnected from the world. He stopped near a bus stop. Taking a deep breath, he turned back for one last look at his workplace. There was no anger, no sadness. Just a vast emptiness. Maybe his boss was right. But still, something was missing. He could feel it. He started walking again, the cold air filling his lungs, one thought echoing in his mind. There has to be a way out. Or was this really all there was? As soon as Alex opened the door, the familiar yet heavy air of the house settled over him. His mother and father were sitting around the small dining table. The food was there, but no one had touched it. The only thing filling the room was silence, tense, expectant silence. Alex knew this moment all too well. How many times had he walked into this house, carrying the weight of disappointment on his shoulders? How many times had he held his breath, knowing he was about to be questioned? And how many times had he found himself in the same conversation? Just as he stepped inside, it came, the thing he had been expecting. His father's firm, cold voice echoed through the room. "Alex, did you get fired again?" A shiver ran down his spine. His breath caught in his throat. His fists clenched inside his pockets, almost involuntarily. He had heard this sentence so many times before, yet it still stung just the same. A person should feel like their home is a refuge. But for him, this place was nothing more than a courtroom, and he was always facing the same accusations. His father's voice grew louder. "Is this what you call a life, Alex? When are you going to get a real job?" Alex lowered his head slightly. He didn't want to speak. He knew that no matter what he said, the answer wouldn't change. Then his mother's voice broke the silence. There was no anger in it, just tired disappointment. "We gave you everything, we supported you," she said, her gaze shifting toward the untouched plates on the table. "But it's always the same. You find a job, work for a while, and then we end up right back here." Alex gritted his teeth. He had been hearing these words since he was a child. He had lost count of how many times he had sat through this exact moment, his failures laid out like a list in front of him. But tonight was different. Because this time he had nowhere else to go. His mother looked away when she saw the darkness in Alex's expression. But her voice didn't soften. "When will you get your life together, Alex?" That question cut through him like a knife. When would he get his life together? How many times had he started over? How many times had he found a new job? How many times had he walked out of this house with hope, only to return with nothing but disappointment? How many times had he tried, only for it to never be enough? Nothing had ever been enough. His mind throbbed under the weight of the past. The room felt smaller. The walls were closing in. Even breathing was becoming difficult. And then, there was a knock at the door. A clear, firm sound, cutting through the silence like the signal of a change. The knock came again. This time, the sound made the tense silence inside the house even sharper. Alex took slow, heavy steps toward the door. Just before placing his hand on the doorknob, he hesitated for a second. There was a strange feeling inside him. Was something bad about to happen, or was this the first time in his life that an unexpected chance was knocking? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. As the cold air mixed with the suffocating atmosphere inside, he opened the door despite the chaos in his mind. And in that moment, the world went silent. Parked in the middle of the street was a black SUV, large, sleek, and completely out of place. Among the dusty old cars of the town, this spotless vehicle set off alarm bells in Alex's mind. His heartbeat quickened. His eyes moved to the SUV's dark windows, but he couldn't see inside. He could feel someone was in there, but he had no idea who. A light breeze blew, sending snowflakes drifting through the air, but Alex's mind was stuck on the same question. What the hell is this? Then the driver's door opened. A tall man in a suit stepped out. His stance was firm, his expression unreadable, his movements controlled. He looked like he didn't belong in this town at all. His eyes locked onto Alex as he took a few steps toward him. He wasn't in a hurry, but his gaze was unmistakably direct. "Alex." Alex frowned. A strange uneasiness settled in his chest. There were only a handful of people in this town who knew him, but none of them would approach him like this. Why was a stranger saying his name? What's going on? His throat felt dry. Pushing down the discomfort building inside him, he finally spoke. "Yeah, I'm Alex. Who are you?" His voice carried natural suspicion. The man tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but clear. "I was sent by my boss." A chill ran through Alex's body. "Boss? What boss?" He had just been fired. Just a few hours ago he had lost his job, felt like he had no future, and now someone's boss wanted something from him? Fear and curiosity mixed inside him. Was this some kind of mistake? Or was this actually the beginning of something? The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card, extending it toward Alex. There was a name on it, but in the dim light he couldn't quite make it out. Just as he was about to look closer, the man took a step back and opened the SUV's back door. The moment the door swung open, Alex caught a glimpse of the person sitting inside. A woman. She sat there, silent and composed, her figure barely visible in the shadows. Her face was hard to make out, but something about her made Alex freeze. A strange feeling rose inside him. Did he know her? But how? His mind flooded with questions as he instinctively turned back toward the house. His father's stern glare met him. His mother's worried eyes followed his every move. How many times had he left this house in disappointment? How many times had he come back, realizing nothing had changed? How many times had he felt trapped within these walls, directionless, hopeless? His eyes shifted back to the SUV. Was this a mistake? Or was something truly about to change? His past, his failures, his disappointments, they all stood behind him. But in front of him there was the unknown. He took a deep breath. And then he stepped forward. As Alex took slow, measured steps toward the SUV, he tried to push down the uneasiness bubbling inside him. When he looked through the open door, he recognized a familiar silhouette in the shadows. Jessica. His brows furrowed in surprise. It was the same woman from last night, the one who had been stranded in the cold, the woman whose elegance and strength had left an impression on him. But now here she was sitting in a luxury SUV right outside his house. What was she doing here? A strange feeling stirred in his chest. Jessica met his gaze and gave a slight nod. "Sorry for showing up so suddenly," she said, her voice as graceful as ever, but this time carrying a trace of hesitation. "I found your workplace. They gave me your address. But I'm sorry to hear you got fired." Heat rushed to Alex's face. Embarrassment settled over him like a heavy weight. Losing his job, the years of failure, the shame of coming home to face his parents. Now, on top of all that, the woman he had helped last night knew about his situation. He lowered his gaze, avoiding eye contact. But Jessica wasn't looking at him with pity. Instead, she smiled slightly and continued, "Actually, this works in my favor." There was a hint of amusement in her voice. "If you have some time, I'd like you to come to my office with me." Alex hesitated for a moment. The events of the day had been replaying in his head on a loop, weighing him down. But Jessica's words felt like a spark of hope, something he hadn't expected. He didn't know what this meant, but his instincts told him he shouldn't turn her down. He gave a small nod. "Sure," he said, his voice cautious but filled with curiosity. Jessica nodded in satisfaction and pulled the door closed. As Alex stepped into the SUV, the uneasy feeling inside him only grew stronger. The ride was silent. The vehicle moved smoothly out of the narrow town streets and onto broader, more modern roads. Alex watched the city lights blur past, wondering where they were headed. He didn't have to wonder for long. The SUV pulled up in front of a luxury corporate building. This was nothing like what Alex was used to. A large, gleaming sign stood at the entrance. His eyes scanned the bold letters. Weston Motors. A strange sense of excitement crept over him. As Jessica stepped out of the car, he followed suit. The building's towering glass walls, its modern design, and the employees in sharp suits coming in and out, it was clear that this was no ordinary place. As Jessica walked in, the security guards and receptionists all acknowledged her with polite nods. That was when it truly hit Alex. She wasn't just anyone. As they stepped into the elevator, his curiosity was almost unbearable. As the doors closed and they ascended to the top floor, Jessica turned to him. "Alex, I own a car manufacturing company," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "I'm the CEO of Weston Motors. We collaborate with major brands and we have a strong place in the industry." Alex's eyes widened. This wasn't just some repair shop, this was an automotive empire. Jessica continued, "Last night when you helped me, I noticed how skilled and professional you were. You understand engines, mechanical systems. And you were dedicated to what you were doing. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a chance. We're always looking for people like you. And the working conditions here are much better." For a moment, Alex forgot to breathe. This couldn't be real. That morning he had lost his job. And now he was standing in the top floor of a luxury corporate tower, receiving a job offer from a CEO. It felt like his prayers had been answered. But his honesty held him back. He looked directly at Jessica, his voice quiet but sincere. "To be honest, my last job let me go because they didn't think I was good enough," he admitted. "I'm worried I won't meet your expectations. Maybe I'm not as skilled as you think." Jessica let out a soft laugh, a warm, genuine laugh that instantly put him at ease. "This is a factory, Alex," she said. "We have experienced mentors who will teach you everything you need to know. No one here has to be perfect. All we need is someone willing to learn and work hard." As her words sank in, the tension in Alex's body slowly faded. For the first time, someone wasn't pointing out his failures, they were showing him his potential. Jessica wasn't offering him a handout. She was offering him a real chance. And Alex realized he wanted to take it. This place could be where his life finally changed. Alex accepted Jessica's offer. He still felt a sense of unease, but for the first time, someone had made him believe that he could actually succeed. Years of harsh words and constant criticism had worn him down. But Jessica's trust in him was enough to spark a glimmer of hope. Before he even started at the company, Jessica gave him a company car, a brand new luxury model. When Alex sat behind the wheel, he could hardly believe it. It felt like the first real thing he had ever earned for himself. But at the same time, it came with a sense of responsibility. When he arrived home, his parents were stunned. His father's eyes immediately locked onto the car, while his mother hesitated for a moment, then looked at Alex. For the first time, they saw their son looking genuinely happy and confident. But despite that, there was still doubt in their eyes. His father frowned. "What kind of job did you get this time?" he asked, his voice as stern as ever. When Alex proudly explained his new position, his father simply nodded and muttered, "Let's see how long this one lasts." His mother remained silent, but in her eyes, there was something different, a mixture of worry and hope. For the first time, they saw that he actually had a real shot. But deep down, they still believed he would fail again. This time, though, everything was different. Jessica didn't just give Alex a job, she provided him with support and guidance. The experienced mentors at the factory didn't treat him with coldness or condescension. Instead, they patiently corrected his mistakes, teaching him the finer details of the trade. At first, his hands trembled as he worked. But as the months passed, he began handling tasks with skill and confidence. Jessica frequently checked on his progress, encouraging him along the way. Over time, Alex transformed from just another worker into one of the company's most skilled specialists. As the months went by, he started working on high-end luxury cars. Once, he had struggled with basic engines. Now he was specializing in advanced, high-tech, custom-built vehicles. By the end of his first year, he had become a well-respected name within the company. People sought him out for his expertise. His success didn't just change his career, it changed his entire family's life. He paid off the debts his father had carried for years. And he didn't stop there. He helped his parents finally buy the home they had rented for so long. When his parents saw what he had accomplished, the doubt in their eyes slowly faded. Pride took its place. For the first time, his father looked at him and said, "I'm proud of you, son." And in that moment, Alex realized it was the most important thing he had ever heard in his life. For years, Alex had blamed himself for his failures. But now he understood it was never about him. It wasn't that he lacked skill or potential. The problem was that no one had ever believed in him. He had always been in the wrong places, surrounded by the wrong people, people who never valued him, never gave him the confidence to succeed. He had convinced himself he would never amount to anything because no one had ever shown him that he could. But when Jessica gave him a chance, everything changed. The right environment, the right support, and the right opportunity had allowed Alex's true potential to surface. The man who had once been fired with no direction in life had now become one of Weston Motors' most essential experts. As Weston Motors continued to grow, producing prestigious luxury cars, Alex became one of the most respected craftsmen behind the brand's success. The man who once saw himself as a failure was now valued, respected, and in demand. This was his greatest victory. True success had been shaped by the hands of those who believed in him. Have you seen how important second chances are in life? If Alex's story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more motivational content. If you enjoyed this story, you can support us by liking the video. Don't forget to leave a comment to share your thoughts and your own experiences with us. See you in the next video.